Hey everyone, Mr. PF here again. I was at Value Village the other day and came across an old PS2 controller that was pretty beat up looking. It was only like $3, so I figured I'd go ahead and make a video of me cleaning it up, and then also doing an old mod that I used to do back in the day, which just includes switching out the LED for the analog button. It's a very simple mod, but if you're not very comfortable with modding your controllers, it's a great way to get into it and kind of learn the insides of it. That way you can mod your PS3 and PS4 controllers more comfortably. I'm just going to be using some isopropyl alcohol, a few toothpicks, and a couple ear swabs to clean the controller itself, along with a few paper towels. So I went ahead and jumped forward to where I got the controller all wiped down right before I'm going to take it apart, and you can see the pile of stuff that I've wiped off the controller here. Pretty nasty. So I'm showing you here that the analog status light is red right now, and we're going to be switching it to blue later on in the video. So now go ahead and grab a small Phillips head screwdriver and go ahead and take the screws on the back of the controller apart. Sometimes some of the screws, the plastic piece that anchors it down has been broken off inside the controller and it will just keep spinning. So if you get a couple of those, just go ahead and move on to the next one and then come back to that one if the controller won't come apart later. So now that you have all the screws undone, go ahead and just give the controller a wiggle and the two halves should come apart pretty easily. If you're trying really hard to pull the controller apart, make sure that you have all your screws loosened up. So as you can see in this controller, one of the screws had been completely rusted out, and the rust is actually falling out of the back of the controller. It's actually one of the screws that has the plastic pieces busted off inside, and so I'm going to show you how to get those off right here. So here you can see the piece of plastic that's actually supposed to be attached to the front half of the controller. If you have one or two of these on your controller, you don't really have to worry about it because the rest of the screws will hold it together, but here I'm going to show you how to get it off. All you need is a pair of pliers and hold one side and then use a screwdriver on the other side to try to extract the screw out. So you can see here that it kind of fought me a little bit, but it wasn't too bad and loosened up pretty easily. So here I'm showing you doing the other one. I had two screws actually on this controller where the plastic anchors had broken off on the inside, and so I'm not going to worry about having to replace those right now because the rest of the screws will hold the controller together for the time being. I have seen quite a few PS2 controllers like this where some of the screw holes are actually missing and they still hold together just fine, but if you have any more than two of these, your controller might not want to hold together right, and you might get away with putting some longer screws into them, or you'll have to figure out a better way to anchor the controller together. So now that once you have the back off, there's just one Phillips screw, and once you remove that, you'll be able to pull out the whole insides of the controller. So once you remove that screw, I just like to tug down on the area where the rumble motors are, and usually the whole board will come out pretty easily. Now that you have the controller completely taken apart, go ahead and grab the faceplate again and start removing all the buttons inside of it. Also make sure to be careful because if you drop the buttons on the ground, they do like to bounce around and they can be kind of hard to find. So now that you have all your buttons removed from the controller, I like to go ahead and grab a paper towel, put a little bit of isopropyl alcohol in it, and kind of give everything a general wipe down and kind of scrub the buttons. As you can see, some of the buttons will usually have dirt rings on them from the years of grime built up inside of them. So here I'm trying to give you an idea of how dirty some of the buttons can be. This is not too abnormal for a controller, but this one is pretty nasty. So now once you have all your buttons wiped off and cleaned up, make sure you also wipe down the pads and clean them up also. Otherwise the buttons can get sticky and they won't react very well. So I'm going to go ahead and clean my workstation up here a little bit, and then I'm going to go ahead and grab the D-pad. I like to use the ear swabs and take a little bit of isopropyl alcohol and give it a good scrub down on the inside because it seems like that's where a lot of the dirt is collecting. So we're going to work on cleaning the controller now. So I'm giving you a little look here around the back side of the controller of how dirty it actually is and how much stuff can actually collect on the controller over time. Now that I'm ready to work on cleaning the back half of the controller, I'm going to go ahead and grab a toothpick, and then I'm going to go around the outside of the whole entire shell and scrape off all the residual stuff that's just kind of sitting there before I come back and hit it with some alcohol. I'm going to go ahead and jump forward and so you guys don't have to watch me scrape the whole controller. So it probably took me about 5 minutes to scrape the whole controller down, and now you can see I have a pile of dirt and old goldfish and probably Oreos and all kinds of stuff here in front of me. So here I'm showing you the front half of the controller. As you can see, it's just as dirty, and so I'm just going to go ahead and skip forward to where I've already scraped the whole front half down also. So now I'm back here and you can see I have the whole front half scraped down, and I even have more residual goldfish and meatloaf and who knows what else is probably inside of this controller. So now that you have the front and the back half of the controller scraped down, I like to just go ahead and take a ear swab, take and put a little bit of isopropyl alcohol on the tip, and then basically go around the outside of the controller and do the same thing, but just scrub it all down with the alcohol. If your controller is anywhere as close as dirty as mine, the ear swab will get nasty pretty fast, so you might have to switch a couple ear swabs in between cleaning the front and the back half of the controller. So jumping forward to this part here, also make sure not to forget to clean out the trigger areas, and also swab out the inside of the area where the X, circle, square, triangle buttons are, otherwise your buttons might get sticky in there and not want to react very well. So now that you have the front and the back half of the controller scraped and wiped down and cleaned to an acceptable point, go ahead and move your circuit board forward and go ahead and pop the joysticks off of the front, and then grab a paper towel, put some isopropyl alcohol on the paper towel, and go ahead and give your sticks a good wipe down, and also make sure not to forget to wipe underneath the rim of them, otherwise they might want to rub up against the controller and kind of stick if there's been anything sticky in the controller. So once your sticks are all wiped down and cleaned up, I like to go ahead and give the contact film on the front of the controller just a good wipe down, so that way you know that there's nothing sticky on it. And then we're going to go ahead and move to the controller and start modding the LED. So like I said before, this is a pretty easy mod. I like to just go ahead and start on the back side, and if you look at the rumble motors, you can actually push them out of the plastic housing pretty easily, so go ahead and start by doing that. So once you have the rumble motors out, you can actually flip the motherboard down on the controller like I am here. I actually moved the wire that comes into the controller out of the way for the time being, but you could probably get away with just putting something in front of it to hold the plastic piece up off the motherboard. So once you have your motherboard in a position where you can access the LED fairly easily, I like to take a small Phillips or flathead screwdriver and just kind of separate the legs of the LED a little bit, because it makes it a little bit easier to get in there with a pair of snips. Showing you here a little bit what I'm talking about. Now once you have the legs of the LEDs separated a little bit like that, I like to take a sharp pair of snips and I like to just cut the LED off. I like to leave one leg a little bit longer than the other leg. That way I can test the LED for polarity, and then that way I know which one is positive and which one is negative. I'll show you the process of that here in a minute. So you can see here now that one leg of the LED is a little bit longer than the others. It'd be just like that if you bought some raw material LEDs, but the reasoning for this is just so I can distinguish which side is positive and which side is negative. So now we're going to determine which side is positive and which side is negative, like I mentioned earlier. I'm just using a couple small button cell batteries that I'm going to stack together, and then I'm going to take the LED that we cut off and put the LED on the batteries to see which side's positive and negative. And once I figure that out, I'm just going to go ahead and mark that on the motherboard of the PS2 controller. So make sure you pay attention to which side of the battery is positive and negative when you're doing this, so that way you don't forget. So once you know which side's positive and which side's negative, go ahead and mark it on the motherboard like I did here. I was pretty tired in this video, and so I actually marked the polarities backwards, but I caught it before I soldered the LED in, so it's all fine. So now that you have everything marked, I like to go ahead and cut the remaining leads that are coming off the motherboard, with just leaving a little bit extra behind, that way you can solder to it easily. Give you a little look here of how my leads looked after I trimmed them down some. So now that you have your leads trimmed down, go ahead and grab your LED of what color choice you're going to use. I'm using blue this time. I'm going to go ahead and cut the leads on this LED down just a little bit also, but leaving enough that way it can kind of reach to the same position the original one was in. So here I'm going to diffuse the LED a little bit. The LEDs that come in the controller are square LEDs, which you can find exact replacements for, but I don't have any, so I'm just going to use a water clear lens 3mm LED that I have laying around, and I'm just going to take some sandpaper and go around the whole outside of the LED, and also do it on the front lens of the LED a little bit, just to kind of make it to where it's not shining right in your eyes. Again, they sell LEDs that are pre-diffused like this, but I don't have any, so I'm just doing this real fast to make my own. So once you're done doing this, your LED should actually look like it's frosted glass now, and the tip of it should actually be flat instead of rounded. So now I have my soldering iron preheated and I have the LED in my helping hands. I'm going to just go ahead and put a little bit of flux on each leg of the LED, and I'm just going to tin the legs real fast, and then I'm going to go ahead and repeat that same process on the legs that are coming out of the motherboard. So now that you have the leads on both sides tinned, I like to just go ahead and grab a pair of tweezers, or I have these pliers that have an angled tip to them, and it allows me to be able to hold the LED over the leads coming out of the motherboard while also being able to access it with the soldering iron. So here you can see me soldering it in. Having the angled pliers is a big help when you're trying to solder in a location like this. Once you have one leg soldered securely in, you can go ahead and let go of it with the pliers and just solder the other leg in. Sometimes you might have to do what I'm doing here and take a little screwdriver and just push the legs over back and forth a little bit until you get them to line up, so that way they're easier to solder together. So once you have both legs soldered in, you're done. Now you can just go ahead and start the process of reassembling the controller again. I'm going to go ahead and skip forward some, that way you guys don't have to watch me put the whole controller back together. So here I am with the controller put back together. A little tip: when you're putting the back on, it's a lot easier to pop the L2 and R2 buttons out when you're putting it back together, and then snap them back in once you have the controller all screwed back together. But here you can see the controller all restored, nice and cleaned up, and the analog status light changed from red to blue. If you want to see more videos like this, please like, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned. Thanks for watching.